It's kind of an interesting chapter. So let's go ahead and get started. There you go, Albert Einstein, everybody's favorite scientist. Applying social psychology to law, business, and health. For more than half a century, social psychologists have been studying the American legal system and applying social psychology. The law ultimately rests on assumptions about how people will behave. Law and psychology are both concerned with the prediction and control of human behavior through its findings in such areas of inquiry as social perception, prejudice and stereotyping, attitudes, group processes and dynamics, persuasion and conformity. Social psychology can clarify some of the assumptions that the law routinely makes about human beings. During a trial, there is one type of evidence that is of paramount importance to the jury, and that's the eyewitness. An eyewitness is a person who observed the crime and can relate the events to the jury in court. Eyewitnesses are crucial to the outcome of criminal trials, and eyewitness testimony is frequently the primary or sole evidence against a defendant. According to practicing attorneys, eyewitness evidence ranks as the second most common type of evidence after crime scene photographs in homicide cases. The presence of an eyewitness markedly increases conviction rates. Because of the eyewitness's crucial role and the fact that many social psychological variables influence perceptions, there is a vast body of research on the performance of eyewitnesses. Two classes of variables can influence the accuracy of an eyewitness: estimator variables and system variables. Estimator variables are related directly to the eyewitness and the conditions under which the eyewitness viewed the crime. They include the lighting, the exposure time, the presence of a weapon, and personal biases and eyewitnesses, and personal biases of the eyewitness. System variables are variables that are under control of the criminal justice system. They include the time that elapses between the crime and the questioning of a witness, the manner in which a lineup is conducted, and the way that questions are asked of eyewitnesses. Both classes of variables influence the accuracy of eyewitness perceptions, memories, and reports. One important estimator variable is whether a weapon is present during the commission of a crime. Weapons command our attention and change our perceptual world. When a gun is pointed at us, we are less able to pay attention to other details of a situation. This phenomenon is called weapon focus. The presence of a weapon reduces eyewitness accuracy. When witnessing a crime, high salience details are more likely to be included than low salience details, though even very low salience items are recalled quite accurately. Detail salience is most critical for the completeness of a witness report. In this case, the higher the salience of any item, the more complete the report of that detail. Thus, details that stand out, such as a weapon, are most likely to be remembered and reported by an eyewitness to a crime. In a meta-analysis of 28 studies on weapon focus, Fawcett et al. In 2013 not only found evidence for a moderate effect of weapon presence, they also found that retention interval, threat, and exposure duration all had significant effects on the memory performance. Weapon focus effect is stronger if a female perpetrator was holding a weapon during a crime than a male perpetrator. Because weapons are more associated with men than women, the weapon stands out more with the female perpetrator and has a greater effect on eyewitness accuracy. Research by Mansour et al. In 2019 found that participants remembered less when the perpetrator was holding a threatening object, the gun or a knife, than a non-threatening object. They also found that participants remembered more when the perpetrator was holding a common item than an unusual object like a weapon. Participants were less accurate in identifying the perpetrator in a lineup if he held a gun or knife. It is the threatening nature of the weapon more than its unusual nature that contributes to the weapon focus effect. Yet another important variable that affects eyewitness accuracy is the emotional experience of the eyewitness. When a crime is violent, eyewitnesses experience more negative emotion and are generally less accurate than when a crime is nonviolent. A violent crime is a highly stressful event that may impair an eyewitness's ability to accurately recognize the perpetrator of a crime. Stress may interact with other variables such as the type of event, emotional or neutral, and the type of detail to be recalled, high or low salience in eyewitness memory situations. Eyewitnesses have to remember information concerning binding factors, who did what in a crime. An eyewitness might have a recall which of multiple perpetrators held a gun on victims and which stole money. This is all in addition to having to recall specific details, for example, the race of the perpetrator or the type of gun. Earls et al. Found that emotion enhanced memory for the specific details, but not for the binding factors. They also found that this effect was strongest for older compared to younger witnesses. Human memory tends to be more frail and subject to outside influence than we are willing to admit. In our day-to-day lives, we have memory failures all the time. When an eyewitness fails to recall something accurately, it may mean that an innocent person goes to prison. Our memories are stored in a dynamic way. We tend to store details of events, and during recall, we reconstruct the original event through a process known as reconstructive memory. The dynamic nature of human memory suggests that information in memory can be influenced by a variety of factors. What we decide to encode in memory is affected by information already in the memory. Information already in memory can be affected by post-event information, new information that we encounter after witnessing an event. Post-event information in a variety of forms has been found to influence what eyewitnesses have in memory and what they report about a crime. When a piece of information that was not part of the original event becomes part of the eyewitness's memory of the event, it is known as a misinformation effect. The misinformation effect can occur when misleading information is encountered before the event. Misleading information may bias a witness by setting up an expectation that certain information will be encountered. Misleading information need not be specific to the event witnessed to produce a biasing effect. The side that presents eyewitness testimony wins the trial, even if the other side has objective evidence to counterbalance the eyewitness testimony. The power of the eyewitness remains intact even when other types of evidence, such as DNA evidence, are presented. O'Neill et al. Found that when the prosecution presents a credible eyewitness, conviction rates are high. This strongly suggests that the impact of the eyewitness testimony remains strong, regardless of other types of evidence presented. According to the Innocence Project in 2020, 69% of the individuals convicted of crimes but later cleared by DNA evidence were initially convicted based on wrongful eyewitness testimony. It may be that jurors are simply not aware of problems associated with eyewitness testimony, identification, and memory. Juror knowledge was lower for the weapon focus effect and the eyewitness confidence accuracy relationship. One solution to this problem is to have a social psychologist provide expert testimony about the potential pitfalls of eyewitness testimony. Such expert testimony has been allowed and used in criminal trials. Two major issues arise when considering the role of expert witnesses. First, the jurors are already aware of the problems associated with eyewitness testimony. Second, will an expert make jurors overly skeptical and lead them to reject all eyewitness testimony? A typical criminal trial is played out in 3 acts, each with a number of scenes. The first act involves selecting a jury. A panel of citizens known as the venire is drawn from the community. From the venire, the jury is selected. The second act is the trial itself. During the trial, the lawyers make opening and closing statements, witnesses are presented, and the judge issues instructions to the jurors. If there were eyewitnesses to the crime, they often form the centerpiece of this part of the process. The third and final act is played out behind closed doors. After hearing all the evidence and arguments, the jury retires to deliberate, discuss the evidence, and reach a verdict. The climax of Act 3 is reached when the jury announces its verdict in open court. Once the jury is selected, jury members sit as individuals and hear all the evidence in the case. They are not permitted to discuss the case with each other or anyone else. After the evidence is presented, the judge instructs the jury about the law applicable to the case. Jury members then retire to a jury room and by their own devices deliberate and come to a verdict. Once the jury members retire to the jury room, they become a group. They must discuss the case and arrive at a verdict. When a juror deviates from an emerging majority consensus, pressure is exerted on the deviant juror to accept the majority view. A major side effect of this shift from 12-person to a 6-person juries is the potential for different conformity effects. Because fewer people are involved, minorities are less likely to be represented on a small jury. In a 6-person jury, the odds are that there will be only one juror with a dissenting opinion, whereas in a 12-person jury, 2 minority views are more likely. During the deliberation process, the decisions of the individual jurors must be blended into a single unanimous, in most cases, a group decision. Jury deliberation is dominated by discussions of the evidence and statements in support of jurors' verdicts. Generally, the pre-deliberation distribution of individual verdicts is a good predictor of the final verdict of the jury. That is, if there is an 11-1 guilty, not guilty pre-deliberation distribution, the jury will convict in 99% of the cases. A reversal is extremely rare. As the majority-minority split becomes more even, the probability of conviction or acquittal drops accordingly. It appears that juries operate under a simple decision rule. If there is a 2/3 majority, the likelihood is that the jury will find in the direction of the majority. If the majority is less than 2/3, but more than 1/2, then the likelihood is that the jury will hang. In cases where the split is even or almost even, juries often default to acquittal. Individual decisions translate into a final verdict via 2 social psychological mechanisms: informational social influence and normative social influence. Informational social influence involves a person changing his or her view based on the content of the deliberations. Normative social influence involves a person changing based on perceived pressure to conform. A white eyewitness will be less accurate identifying a black suspect than identifying a white suspect, and the same will be true for a black eyewitness and a white suspect. This phenomenon is known as the other race effect and has been shown to exist in both blacks and whites alike. This phenomenon has been shown to exist in most cross-race identifications, including white Canadian and First Nation people. Members of a race that have a great deal of experience with faces from another race have a reduced other race bias than those with less experience. Thorup et al. Demonstrated this with Asians living in Asia and Asian Americans. In fact, the Asian Americans showed a reversal of the effect. There is a difference in how own race and other race phases are processed. Two types of processing are done: holistic processing and configural and component processing. Holistic processing involves processing facial features independently. Configural and component feature processing involves processing facial features independently, how we process most objects that we perceive. In the criminal justice system, confession evidence is persuasive. However, not all confessions are true, and the reasons behind different type of false confessions vary from case to case. Kaysen and Reitzman in 1985 categorized false confessions as falling into one of three categories: voluntary, compliant, and internalized. Voluntary false confessions are situations where an individual claims responsibility for a crime without police influence. Compliant false confessions are characterized by suspects confessing in order to escape a stressful police interrogation or to avoid punishment. Internalized false confessions occur when suspects not only confess to a crime they did not commit, but often through the use of suggestion come to believe they are guilty. How frequent are false confessions? One study showed that 32% of confessions from German prison inmates were false, a percentage in line with other research. One tactic used in interrogations to discover false confessions is the introduction of misinformation. A factor that can lead to a false confession is sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation may be a problem if interrogations last for several hours. In verified cases of false confessions, 39% lasted between 12 and 24 hours, and 34% between 6 and 12 hours. According to Leo and Davis, between 14 and 60% of wrongful convictions relate to false confessions. Leo and Davis suggest that false confessions bias a criminal case because of 7 psychological factors: the information in the confession itself, tunnel vision and the confirmation bias, motivational bias. Once a confession is obtained, the goals of investigators and prosecutors can change from finding the truth to obtaining a conviction, escalating commitment to the idea of the suspect's guilt. Emotion. Confessions, including false ones, take place in the context of strong emotions. Institutional considerations. Institutional factors such as financial considerations may motivate investigators to elicit a confession. Inadequate context for evaluating evidence. Industrial organizational psychology explains and clarifies behaviors in the workplace. Employers routinely must decide who to hire, how to evaluate employee performance, and how to motivate employees to perform at their best. Findings in the areas of social perception, persuasion, social influence, and group processes can help improve the accuracy of these decisions and help employers avoid potential biases and errors. IO psychologists who specialize in personnel psychology assist organizations in areas such as employee selection, recruitment, and performance reviews. Traditionally, personnel selection is a 3-step process: job analysis, employee recruitment, and employee screening. Job analysis is a systematic study of a job's tasks, duties, and responsibilities, and the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to perform the job. An IO psychologist might use research methods such as observation, surveys, job diaries, or interviews to get a better sense of what a particular job entails and how to measure job performance. Employee recruitment is the process of attracting potential workers to apply for jobs. Organizations might use advertisements, college recruitment programs, employment agencies, online job sites, and even Facebook to attract applicants. It is in the best interest of the organization to attract a large pool of applicants, and past research has found that initial recruiting strategies have a significant effect on the size of the applicant pool. Organizations are looking for the best qualified applicants, but at the same time, applicants are looking for organizations with positive qualities. Generalized job boards, for example, Monster.com or Indeed.com, often produce low-quality recruits compared to industry-specific job boards such as healthcarejobsite.com for people in the healthcare industry. Job seekers tend to use job boards more frequently, and they see them as more effective as compared to social networking sites. Social networking sites can be divided into two broad categories. There are professionally oriented sites like LinkedIn. There are social network sites that are primarily used to connect with family and friends, such as Facebook. Job seekers tend to find the most professional sites more effective. Before checking references, employers may first examine a potential applicant's social network profiles. Employee screening is the process of reviewing information about job applicants. Organizations might start with a review of written materials such as applications, resumes, and cover letters. The second step in screening could be employee testing to ensure that the job applicant has the skills necessary to perform the job. Any screening test or method must demonstrate that it is a reliable and valid predictor of job performance. Screening tests must have high content validity, or whether the test content adequately measures the knowledgeable skills and abilities required by the job, and criterion related to validity, or the relationship between screening test scores and some criterion of job success. Employee screening tests vary widely and can include cognitive ability tests, mechanical ability tests, motor and sensory ability tests, job skills and knowledge tests, personality tests, and polygraphs. Although standardized tests can be powerful and effective tools at predicting job performance, the burden of demonstrating this relationship is on the employer. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and its 1967 amendment prohibit discrimination based on race, religion, color, national origin, or sex. If an employment practice adversely affects one of these groups, the practice is illegal. The law allows employers to discriminate against employees on the basis of religion, sex, or national origin in instances where the religion, sex, or national origin of the employee is a bona fide occupational qualification. Hooters Hooters has been taken to court several times, and Hooters has always won. Hooters, and actually, they just filed for bankruptcy. Hooters claims that they need their servers to be female because that fits their occupational qualifications, and they win every time. The BFOQ is for young, attractive female waitresses. Employees need to know how they are doing. That's why I had the picture of the Hooters girls, because that's huge. It's like the only one. Other institutions such as Catholic colleges will try to recruit Catholic professors. Baylor, for example, is a Baptist school, and not only Baylor, but the Wesleyan schools, Indiana Wesleyan. You have to sign a declaration of Christianity in order to teach at those institutions. It's really kind of interesting. Employees need to know how they are doing in their job. Performance appraisals assess worker performance in comparison to some standards and provide valuable information to the worker and the organization. Performance appraisals are usually tied to pay increases and promotions, and ideally they should help to improve employee performance. There are different types of measures of tools that can be used to evaluate an employee. Supervisors may choose to compose a written narrative of the worker's performance or complete a checklist of the worker's performance on different tasks. On trait-based scales, workers are evaluated on their personality and job-related traits, such as leadership and initiative. Behavior-based scales, such as the Behavioral Observation Scale, the BOS, require raters to recall how frequently an employee has engaged in specific job-related behaviors. Zinner and Kopelman argue that BOS-based evaluations have advantages over other measures because of the focus on directly observable behavior. It is important that an employee view the appraisal process as one that is fair and credible, with factors such as selecting raters who have sufficient opportunity to observe the ratee, training the rater, using an appraisal instrument that is clear and has face validity. These factors can influence perceptions of fairness and legitimacy of the appraisal process. Sala et al. In 2013 found that employees' perceptions of fairness in performance appraisals were positively related to satisfaction with the process of organizational commitment. And this has just come up with the faculty at Diné College. They've been working on their job appraisal system for like the last 4 years. They finally came up with something, and the faculty association dissolved for some reason. Research has found that attractive individuals are evaluated more positively on a number of different dimensions. The halo effect can also occur in performance appraisals. Raters might use positive information they have about the worker in one area and rate the worker more positively across all areas. According to McClellan, 1961, people are motivated by 3 needs: achievement, power, and affiliation. Most individuals will be motivated by one need more strongly than the other 2. A worker who has a strong need for achievement will be motivated by possibilities for success in the workplace and to avoid failures. A well-known need theory is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the base of Maslow's hierarchy are basic physiological needs such as food, water, and sleep, followed by safety needs, for example, having a place to live, social needs, for example, relationships with friends and family. The next level includes esteem needs, or the need to be admired and respected by others. The highest level of hierarchy is self-actualization, or the need to reach one's highest potential. How might we apply Maslow's hierarchy of needs to the workplace? Let's imagine Sam is a mid-level manager in a bank. He makes more than enough money to pay for food and rent. As Sam's manager, you might try to figure out if Sam's social needs are being met. Is he connected with other coworkers and customers? If this social needs at the job are being met, then you might try and motivate Sam by satisfying his esteem needs through the development of an employee recognition program, for example, Employee of the Month. When the assessment of the relationship between needs and job motivation, we must consider the salience of the needs with respect to the job. A salient need is one that is closely associated with one's job. Sahu et al. Studied the relationship between need salience and job motivation. They found that only salient needs correlated significantly with job motivation. Non-salient needs were not related to job motivation. IO psychologists often look at personality traits as a way of understanding differences in work motivation among individuals. Personality is a strong predictor of one's job choice and job satisfaction. In a recent meta-analysis of the research on personality and job satisfaction, researchers found both neuroticism and conscientiousness to be significantly associated with job satisfaction, the former negatively and the latter positively. Goal-setting theory suggests that an individual's conscious goals and intentions are the primary determinants of behavior. A goal is the object or aim of an action, usually within a specified time limit. For goals to be most effective, they must be specific and difficult. Meta-analytic findings indicate that the most difficult goals produce the highest levels of effort and performance. Setting a specific goal leads to better performance compared to a do your best or more general goals. For goals to be effective, they must be clear and individuals must be committed to them. Individuals tend to be more committed to goals that are important to them and more committed when self-efficacy is high. Individuals need to believe that they can actually achieve the goal. Organizations can facilitate self-efficacy by providing workers with skills training and mentors. They can provide workers with feedback about performance, which can increase motivation toward the goal. Feedback allows for individuals to make changes to their strategies and adjust their future behaviors. According to Locke and Latham in 1990, goals serve a directive function. They direct attention and effort toward goal-relevant activities and away from goal-irrelevant activities. Goals have an energizing effect. Difficult goals lead to increased effort with both physical and cognitive tasks. Goals influence persistence. Hard goals prolong effort. Goals lead to the arousal, discovery, and/or use of task-relevant knowledge and strategies. If the task for which a goal is assigned is new to people, they will engage in deliberate planning to develop strategies that will enable them to attain their goals. According to Organ in 1988, organizational citizenship behaviors are those that promote the efficient and effective functioning of the organization, typically without any formal reward tied to them. Organizational citizenship behaviors can fall into one of several categories: altruism, conscientiousness, sportsmanship, courtesy, and civic virtue. Researchers found that higher levels of charisma in a leader is positively related to organizational citizenship behaviors, but this relationship was mediated by work engagement. Charismatic leaders are more likely to have workers who are engaged in and enthusiastic about their work, and this in turn is related to more organizational citizenship behaviors. Health in the United States and other Western countries has changed dramatically in the past century. Whereas in past generations, infectious diseases such as influenza and tuberculosis were a major cause of death, today we see chronic, mostly preventable diseases as the leading causes of death. According to the CDC, 60% of adults in the United States have a chronic disease. Almost 50% of deaths each year in the United States are from chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and stroke. And today, 42% of American adults are obese, a condition that is linked to several diseases including heart disease and diabetes. Health is affected by current behaviors and practices, but also by one's history of choices and genetic factors. The study of health is also pluralistic in that it requires conversations between biomedical and behavioral sciences. Spiro, in 2007, advocates for understanding and studying health in a cultural, socioeconomic, and historical context. He emphasizes the importance of recognizing individual differences in health, both within and between individuals. Unmanaged stress and other lifestyle factors have an effect on the immune system. Studies have shown that negative moods and feelings such as depression, anxiety, fear, and anger are associated with a decline in immune functioning. The connections take place through a complex communication system involving the brain, the endocrine system, glands and hormones, and the immune system. The immune system is the body's first line of defense against illness. When it breaks down, the body becomes vulnerable to disease and death. A way of defining stress focuses on how people react both physiologically and psychologically when they are in stressful situations. Selye proposed a three-step model called the Journal Adaptation Syndrome, describing the reaction of the body to a stressor, any event or situation that requires that a person make an adjustment. Stage 1 of this cell-use model is alarm stage, in which the body reacts to the stressor with an instinctive automatic response. A branch of the autonomic nervous system, a part of the nervous system that operates independently of conscious thought, releases hormones into the bloodstream that prepare the body for fight or flight. Heart rate accelerates, bronchi dilate to allow more air into the lungs, the liver releases sugar for extra energy, digestion halts, perspiration increases to cool the skin, hearing and vision become more acute, and endorphins are released to provide pain relief in case of injury. The body resists such dramatic change from the alarm stage, and as soon as possible it initiates the adjustments needed to restore balance. Stage 2 is the resistance stage, in which the alarm reaction is halted and the body attempts to restore normal functioning. If the stressful situation persists, or if there is a series of such events, the body has difficulty returning to normal. Both the alarm reaction and the resistance stage require a considerable amount of energy. If these stages go on for too long, reserve stores of energy are depleted, and the third stage, the exhaustion stage, sets in. This is not the everyday kind of exhaustion. Rather, it is a profound, life-threatening physiological exhaustion that may be accompanied by such symptoms as distorted thinking and perceptions. At this point, the person becomes vulnerable to disease or death. The effect of an external stressor on a person is mediated first by the person's appraisal, primary appraisal, of the stressor, and second on the resources available to deal with the stressor, secondary appraisal. Primary appraisals involve an individual making an assessment of what is happening in a situation. Secondary appraisals address what one can do about the situation and can be classified as either problem-focused coping or emotion-focused coping. Individuals will engage in both problem-focused and emotion-focused coping strategies. Challenge appraisals are more likely to be followed up by problem-focused coping strategies than threat appraisals. When you view the stressful situation as an outcome, then you are less likely to think there is anything you can do to change that situation. In such cases, individuals focus on making themselves feel better about the situation, emotion-focused coping. However, when you view the stressful situation as one that is still malleable, then you are more likely to try and make the situation better, problem-focused coping. Both good and bad events are considered stressful. Getting married is almost as stressful as going to jail. It may not be that the stressful event causes illness. A person may already be getting sick and therefore be experiencing some of these difficulties. Although stress has been associated with many physical and psychological disorders, not everyone who experiences stress is afflicted. Some people develop effective mechanisms to cope with the stress that they experience. These coping mechanisms help individuals lessen and manage both the causes and the effects of the stress. There is a range of responses that individuals have to stress. Some of these responses are negative, such as drug and alcohol use, while other responses are more positive, such as exercise and reliance on social support. Psychologists are interested in the individual difference variables and socio-structural and situational factors that influence responses to both acute and chronic stress. Research on resilience offers insights into how individuals not only respond to stress, but thrive in the conditions of adversity. Resilience has three components: recovery, defined as a return to baseline function following a major stressor; sustainability, which is the capacity to continue forward during stressors; growth is indicated by enhanced adaptation beyond original levels of functioning. Dunkelscheder and Dolbear identified categories of resilience, resources that individuals use to help them adapt to high levels of chronic stress: personality or individual resources, self and ego-related resources, interpersonal and social resources, worldviews and culturally based beliefs and values, behavior and cognitive skills, other resources such as level of education, health practices, and past experiences with adversity. When individuals are able to call upon these resources, they increase the likelihood that they can achieve healthy physical and psychological functioning in spite of stress or other negative events. People who believe that they have some degree of control over what happens to them also feel that they can effectively cope with stressful or threatening events. These individuals usually express feelings of self-efficacy, the notion that one can do what one sets out to do. People who have strong feelings of self-efficacy are likely to respond to stress by throwing more effort and resources into coping with the threat. According to Skinner and Zimmer-Gimbeck in 2011, when individuals have confidence and high self-efficacy, they are more likely to approach a stressful situation as a challenge as opposed to a threat. They stay focused on solutions to the problem and break tasks into manageable parts. These processes are more likely to be successful when dealing with stressful situations and may even reduce the likelihood of future stressful situations. Individuals who feel they have less control are more likely to see a situation as threatening and give up quickly. Instead of focusing on how to solve the problem, these individuals are preoccupied with fear and worry. Some people are more optimistic than others. Optimistic people are higher on a personality trait known as dispositional optimism, which is the tendency to see things from an optimistic perspective. It is fair to say that optimists and pessimists see the world quite differently. Optimists focus on good things and expect them to happen, whereas pessimists are focused on negative elements and tend to expect bad outcomes. Optimists show selective inattention. Optimists avert their gaze from the negative stimuli, so optimists may wear rose-colored glasses, or rather, they may take their glasses off when negative stimuli are in their field of vision. We know that optimism is sometimes extraordinarily helpful in human affairs. Compared with a pessimistic coping style, an optimistic coping style appears to help individuals recover more rapidly and more effectively from coronary bypass surgery. Research demonstrates that optimistic bypass patients have fewer problems after surgery than pessimistic patients. Following their surgery, the optimists report more positive family, sexual, recreational, and health-related activities than did pessimistic patients. Positive moods affect the way both sick and healthy people deal with stress. People who were sad reported more general aches and pain than did happy people. A positive mood increases people's beliefs that they could lessen their symptoms and cope so that they could carry on daily activities. Mood may also influence the course of illness. A sad, depressed mood often leads to feelings of fatigue and weakness. People may tend to interpret these symptoms as part of their physical illness. Such a misinterpretation of symptoms may slow recovery. Some researchers argue that there is a disease-prone personality in which a persistent depressed mood plays an important role. A good mood is often expressed in laughter. Research shows that laughter may play a role in altering the course of some types of illnesses. The Duke University Comprehensive Cancer Center uses humor, art, music, literature, and anything related to the patient's interests as part of the treatment, including a laugh wagon stocked with humorous tapes and books. An aspect of positive mood and its relationship to coping with stress is one's expectations about the ability to regulate negative moods. This is known as negative mood regulation expectancies, or NMRE. In addition to being related to the ability to regulate negative moods, NMRE also relates to a person's ability to generate positive moods when he or she is experiencing a negative mood. Catanzaro et al. Found that higher levels of NMRE were related to better ability to cope with the emotional stress related to depression. Higher levels of NMRE were also related to higher levels of negative symptoms change. Your condition is extremely serious, Mr. Butkus. You should try laughing more often. Wow. Positive emotions not only seem to help us fight disease, but some evidence suggests that these positive emotions may forestall the onset of certain diseases. Richmond and her colleagues in 2005 reasoned that if negative emotions negatively affected disease outcomes, then positive ones may be helpful. High levels of anxiety are related to a much higher risk of hypertension. That's another name for high blood pressure. The authors hypothesized that the experience of positive emotions bolsters the immune system. It is reasonable to assume that people with hope, curiosity, and other positive emotions may very well take steps to protect their health. Social support is defined as the experience that one is loved and cared for by others and is part of a social network. Social support is linked to a number of positive health outcomes, including better adjustment to stress and diseases such as cancer, diabetes, and rheumatoid arthritis. Social support can even influence how long people live. In a study with terminally ill patients, those who received social support from volunteers lived an average of 80 days longer than those who did not have such support. Other longitudinal research has found that social support can increase one's life expectancy by more than 2 years. Some research has shown that although spouses can be positive sources of social support during an illness, they can also undermine their partner through criticism and blame. Looking at older married couples, wives reported giving more social support to their husbands than receiving. Reports from husbands tended to agree with this finding. They reported receiving more support from their wives than giving. Higher levels of social support were related to lower levels of depression and better emotional functioning in wives. However, wives' reports of being undermined by their husbands were related to more depression and diminished emotional functioning in wives. And that is the end of that. So there you go. Good luck. I hope everybody does well in their final save. There we are. Okay. So that's it. That's the last lecture. So possibly I'll see you in the future. Possibly not. You never know. We'll see how this thing all works out.